I discovered 6 real stories from truckers that will haunt your night. Marisi never should have opened that door. It was just another night on the road, the hum of the tires on the asphalt lulling me into a false sense of security. I was used to long drives, the dark stretching endlessly before me. But something felt off that night. The shadows danced menacingly outside my truck, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. My heart raced. I could hear the wind moaning, a soft, eerie sound that sent chills straight down my spine. The haul was routine. Miles of highway stretched ahead, punctuated by the glow of distant lights. But as I pulled into that truck, stopped dilapidated and flickering under the ghosts of neon, unease seized me. The air was thick, cold even, as if a storm was brewing just out of sight. I could almost taste the fear lingering in the atmosphere. I stepped into the diner. The bell jingled, breaking the unnatural stillness. The waitress had hollow eyes, her smile a mask barely hiding the fear rippling beneath the surface. She served my coffee, and I caught a glimpse of something shifting outside, a figure lurking under the flickering street lamp, cloaked in darkness. I blinked, and the figure was gone. Just like that. Strange noises echoed through the night, a clank, a crash, then silence. Heart pounding, I scanned the diner, watching the other truckers. They were muted, exchanging wide-eyed glances, barely speaking. Rumors swirled among us, tales of whispers on the wind, shadows that followed, and eyes that watched from the roadside. One driver stood up, a hint of wildness in his eyes. "You won't believe what I saw last week," he said, voice trembling. "A girl, lost in the woods, went missing. But I swear I saw her. She just stood there, staring at me." Another driver interrupted. "Yeah? Well, there's a tale of a trucker who vanished. Just like that. His rig was found empty, the doors wide open, a ghost in the wind." And I tried to laugh it off, but my throat was tight. My palms sweated, and I felt the air grow heavier. I could still hear that haunting whisper from the shadows, calling out for me. Each story pulled me deeper into dread. Then, a loud bang. The diner fell silent. All eyes shot toward the door, my breath hitching in my chest. The door swung open violently, revealing nothing but an empty road. But I could feel something behind me, a presence, cold and invasive. Someone gasped. I turned slowly, dread washing over me. There it was, the figure, a silhouette standing just outside, barely illuminated by the flickering light. My heart dropped. I couldn't breathe. And then it moved. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure glided forward, inching from the shadows as if drawn by some unseen force. I blinked, trying to rationalize what I was seeing, but reality twisted like a funhouse mirror before me. The shape was more than just a silhouette. It was a girl, hair long and disheveled, clothes tattered as if she had emerged from a nightmare. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected a deep void, an emptiness that swallowed light whole. "Help me," she whispered, the words a fragile breath that seemed to draw the very warmth from the diner. The patrons exchanged panicked glances, some backing away from the windows as if trying to distance themselves from the looming terror. With a jolting thump, the door slammed shut behind her. The waitress dropped a plate, shattering the porcelain into 1,000 glimmering shards that echoed like the desperate screams of the damned. The clattering noise brought sudden life back to the room, an urgent fear pulsing like a heartbeat. "Stay away from her," the wild-eyed driver shouted, his voice raising in ragged pitch. "You don't know what she is. She's not lost." Just a warning. His words hung heavy in the air, igniting the tension to a boiling point. But something compelled me to move closer to her, against all primal instinct screaming at me to run. "What do you mean?" I stammered, words catching in my throat. Her gaze turned towards me, locking on with an intensity that pierced through the dread. "They're coming," she said, voice steadier now. "You have to leave before she could finish." The entire diner plunged into darkness, as if the world had been snuffed out like a candle. Gasps echoed, and I felt the oppressive weight of terror gripping every soul present. It was as if the shadows had come alive, weaving among us, hungry for fear. Only the faintest glow remained. A sickly greenish light emanated from outside, illuminating the edges of the diner in an otherworldly sheen. I dared to peer through the window. There, in the glow, stood figures, each one shrouded in shadow, eyes burning like coals in the blackness. The waitress whispered incoherently, her frame trembling, as she glanced at the girl with horror unmistakable in her expression. "No, it can't be." A hard knock echoed against the door, sending my heart racing anew. It wasn't a single knock. It was a cacophony, a trio of raps that resonated like a death knell. The girl moved back instinctively, fear wrapping around her like a shroud. "They know," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Before I could comprehend what they meant, I felt something cold touch my should-era vice-like grip, spread ice through my veins. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. Behind me stood an unseen presence, a shimmering outline just out of focus, but the feeling of malevolence was palpable. The shadows twisted around this entity, coiling and writhing like the tail of a monstrous serpent. The horror sank its icy claws deeper into my chest. The realization dawning that this thing wasn't just a present seat was an invitation to the abyss. "Run!" Someone screamed, shattering the paralysis holding me captive. The moment snapped my mind to focus. I was not prepared to remain here, to be claimed by whatever had emerged from the dark. But as I reached for the door, the girl shouted, "The road! Don't take the road!" Panic surged through me. What other option did I have? A crack splintered through the air, and the door buckled inward, flung open by unseen hands, the storm outside rushing in like the wails of the damned. Heart hammering, I stumbled backward, caught between the primal urge to flee and the terrifying knowledge that outside awaited horrors beyond imagination. And then, out of the growing storm of shadows, a voice boomed, chilling yet enticing, echoing through the chaos. "Welcome back, traveler." I turned to the girl, but she had vanished, leaving nothing but the echoes of her warning rippling in the silence. As I looked back toward the door, the world around me began to fade, the shadows consuming. I felt my sanity slipping away, pulled into the darkness that now seemed to stretch endlessly before me. And then, as everything dissolved around me, a cold hand clutched my ankle, dragging me downward into an abyss where no light existed. I screamed. The sound was swallowed whole. I woke gasping, lungs filled with the sharp, metallic tang of fear. The diner had returned, vibrant as ever, though the faces of the patrons were twisted masks of confusion and horror. I was back at a booth, wedged between sticky vinyl seats, surrounded by the dull hum of the refrigerator and the clinking of silverware, trapped in a waking nightmare. But something was different. The lights flickered overhead, struggling against an unseen force, casting long shadows that seemed to creep closer, inching toward me like predatory beasts. I could still feel the icy grip on my ankle, not my ankle. It was as if something had left a mark on my soul, and the chill followed me like an echo of the abyss that clung to my mind. "Are you okay?" A voice broke through the swelling cacophony of noise, pulling me from the depths of my terror. It was the waitress, her eyes wide with a mix of concern and an unnameable fear. "You were gone for a minute. You just stared. What did you see?" I opened my mouth to respond, but words failed me. All I could do was point, trembling toward the door where the figures still lingered, cloaked in shadow, features indistinguishable. My heart pounded, every beat a reminder that whatever I had seen was still lurking beyond the threshold. "They're still out there," I managed to whisper, but my voice, like my confidence, cracked beneath the weight of tension thick enough to suffocate. The waitress followed my gaze, now clutching a salt shaker as if it were a talisman against the evil I felt closing in. "We shouldn't acknowledge them. Just ignore them," she urged, the skin around her eyes taut with terror. The quiet was shattered as the door slammed again, this time rattling the very bones of the diner. The patron's eyes darted to the entrance, anticipation coiling tighter than a noose. I caught sight of wild looks on their faces, and dread knotted deeper in the pit of my stomach. Then a hushed whisper slipped through the cracks of the room, the words curling around us with malevolent intent. "Come closer, we want to play." The air shifted, the temperature dropping dangerously as a chill swept through the diner, causing everyone to shiver involuntarily. The waitress dropped the salt, the grains cascading across the floor like tiny stars falling from a forgotten sky. Beneath the din of rising panic, I heard the sharp creak of the diner's ancient floorboards behind me, an unholy presence advancing. When I turned, I saw nothing but flickering shadows playing tricks on my vision, but I felt Ida pulse, resonating with some lost memory, a rhythm that echoed the heartbeat of the darkness. The driver, wild-eyed and frenzied, shouted over the chaos. "They like to keep you trapped. They'll take what matters most if you don't leave now." His warning blended with the whispers from beyond the door, creating a cacophony that made my mind spin. "We're all just bait." Without a word, I scrambled to my feet, eyes darting toward the window, but instead of faces, there were only smudges of darkness moving like liquid across the glass. The figures outside seemed to meld into one another, a grotesque amalgamation of limbs and shadows that twisted into a grotesque dance. I had to escape. I took a step towards the door, but the waitress seized my wrist, her grip frantic. "Don't! You can't go out there. The road, it's a trap." "Then what do we do?" I yelled, the terror boiling over. "If we stay here..." Well, a chilling silence settled, punctuated only by the whining of the diner's neon sign buzzing overhead. As if in response, the door bulged inward, the wood splintering under immense pressure, glistening in the sickly green light spilling from outside. "Leave her." The girl's voice echoed through my mind, a fervent warning superimposed over the terror of the present. I thought of her vacant eyes, the emptiness that promised disaster. But then, through the silence, I caught another sound, low and guttural, a sound resonating from the shadows, drawing breath that felt too close to my ear. The diner's lights flickered more violently now, causing silhouettes to twist and warp, each flicker closer to revealing something monstrous beyond comprehension. I felt the walls vibrating, reverberating with a hidden dread, and the unmistakable feeling of being surveilled bore down upon me. "What's happening?" I shouted into the gathering darkness, the shadows writhing around me. The answer came not from the waitress or the terrified driver, but from the shadows themselves. A chorus of whispers, chilling and penetrating, filled the diner. "You're ours now. All of you. Time to play." Suddenly, everything went still. I found myself alone in the center of the room, all eyes locked on Mephises of people I thought I knew, now grotesque, mouths stretching into sinister grins. The overwhelming sense of dread seeped into my bones, and I realized, in horror, that the shadows had threaded their way into the hearts of my companions. Helpless, I staggered back, but my escape was cut off as I felt something solid press against my back. I turned, horrified, to see the shimmering apparition materialize, a distorted version of the girl, eyes now blacker than before, a darkness that swallowed all hope. "Join us," she whispered, and as the last syllable escaped her lips, the lights cut out completely, leaving me in suffocating darkness. Then the screams began. The screams pierced the darkness, a cacophony of terror that enveloped the diner. I staggered forward, desperately grasping for something, anything, to ground me in the chaos. The air was thick, saturated with dread that wrapped around me like the tendril-like shadows seeping from the corners of the room. "Wake up!" The waitress' voice sliced through the veil of fear, but it came from somewhere beyond, layered beneath the screams, echoing around me. "You have to wake up now." But how? I could barely breathe, let alone think. The oppressive weight of the darkness seemed to thrum in time with my racing heart, each pulse an invitation to the abyss. I turned back to the specter, the girl from before, now a wicked jester draped in shadows, her laughter intoxicating yet sickening, a macabre lullaby that caressed the edges of my sanity. "Don't you want to play?" she mocked, her voice dripping with malice, as the others twisted remnants of the diner's patrons began to jerk and convulse, their faces morphing into masks of anguish and joy. Caught in this harrowing game, reality splintered. I could no longer discern friend from foe, nor memory from nightmare. Was this what the driver meant when he said we were bait? I gripped the edge of the nearest table, chasing the fleeting hope of solid ground amid the swirling chaos. But the table began to pulse beneath my hands, the surface undulating like the rolling sea. "Get out!" I screamed, my own voice swallowed by the dissonance of shrieks and laughter, echoes of fear playing like a warped tape. I needed to find an exit, to escape the web of shadows tightening around me. But each direction I turned felt oppressive, full of distorted shapes that taunted my senses. And then there was silence again, an absolute and heavy stillness that followed like a predator. The darkness seemed to breathe, in and out, a living entity that absorbed the last remnants of the diner's life. Fear quaked in my chest as slowly, almost imperceptibly, the air shifted, growing dense with anticipation. "Let's make a memory," the girl whispered, an edge of delight bubbling in her tone. I could see them now, the figures creeping forward, reaching out with grotesquely elongated fingers, their skin like dark glass reflecting nothing but despair. I turned and ran, fueled by primal instinct. I dashed toward the kitchen, the only place that felt like sanctuary, despite the ominous shadows coiling around the entrance. The clatter of pans and silverware gave way to a more unsettling sound, the clinking of bones, the scratching of nails against the walls, a melody of grotesque anticipation. I stumbled through the door, desperate to lose myself among the industrial chaos, demanding a route back to the light. Everything was smeared with grease and age, tainted sweet with an unspeakable stench that threatened to smother me. I rounded a corner, and my stomach turned at the sight, a twisted mess of what appeared to be a kitchen. But upon closer inspection, it was another terrifying laugh from the darkness, the remnants of souls entwined in the very machinery that used to serve meals. "Help us," one of them rasped, a face emerging from the twisted mass. "We want to escape too. It's trying to trick you." My instincts screamed as I staggered back, horror clawing at my throat. I could see prison bars made of ice forming around the kitchen, encasing the souls in perpetual torment. The whispers intensified, drumming in time to my thundering heart. "Stay, be ours, it's safe here, no." I choked out, desperation filling my veins. I turned, ripping through the door to escape back to the diner. But it too had transformed into a nightmare, the patrons now writhing like marionettes, manipulated by unseen hands, leaning closer, eyes gleaming with insatiable hunger. I fought against the air heavy with despair, desperately searching for a way out. But the night stood eternal, shadows merging with the edges of reality, every passing second more suffocating than the last. And from the depths of the shadows, nothing but whispers and laughter echoed, mocking my plight. Then I saw Ida faint. Light, flickering with the promise of life, but it was far, across the threshold of the diner's door, the same door that had been an invitation for the shadows. I turned to face the apparition, the twisted girl wearing a grin that could invite madness. "No!" I screamed, voices echoing around me, clawing at me with their whispers. "I'm not yours!" I lunged for the light, pushing past choking darkness, feeling it clawing at my heels. But just before I reached the exit, a cold hand clasped tightly around my throat. "Where do you think you're going?" As I struggled, I could see the faces behind the shadows, the same terrified souls, now twisting in ecstasy. They were smiling at me, and their empty eyes turned hungry. And that haunting laughter rose again, echoing through the diner's walls, promising there would be no escape as the door lurched shut, locking me within an endless play. "Let's play forever," they chorused, and in that moment I understood I was no longer just a witness. I was part of the game now. The air around me vibrated with unsettling energy as the last remnants of the diner's lights flickered out, plunging me deeper into the oppressive darkness of this nightmarish realm. My pulse quickened, thrumming in my ears like a war drum, as the shadows encroached, thickening menacingly like a malignant fog. The laughter of the specters faded into a lingering echo, replaced by the low murmur of despair that seemed to seep from the very walls. As I struggled against the tight grasp of fear, I could feel the warmth of my breath mingling with the chill of the shadows. The sensation was cold and damp, like the fingers of the dead reaching for something lost long ago. My eyes darted around the room, desperately seeking something, anything, that would offer a way out. Suddenly, a scraping sound reached my ears. A slow, deliberate drag, as if something ancient was being pulled into the lightless corner of the diner. Against my better judgment, I moved towards the source of the noise, each careful step weighed down by an instinct that screamed for me to retreat. But I had come too far to turn back now. As I inched closer, the shadows shifted, parting to reveal a grotesque figure crouched low to the ground. It was clad in the remnants of what could have been a uniform, yet the fabric was tattered and stained with some dark substance, blood or something far worse. The figure's head was bowed low, hair hanging in tangled strands, obscuring its face, but the heavy breathing was unmistakable. "Help us," the whisper slithered from its lips, barely more than a breath. Yet it carried the weight of despair that echoed through the diner like a funeral dirge. "They can't rest until we're whole, until you're one of us." With a surge of instinctive fear, I took a step back, the words prickling my skin as a wave of nausea washed over me. What did it mean? Whole? The question echoed ominously in my mind, an unsolvable riddle. I stammered, "What do you mean?" A low, pained laugh escaped the shadowed figure, a sound that sent shivers racing down my spine. Slowly, it raised its head, and I was met with hollow eyes void of humanity, brimming with an unearthly rage. "The shadows crave flesh that knows despair. They toy with you, but you must choose. Will you join us, or will you become the hunted?" Before I could respond, the diner's ambience shifted again. The very essence of the air trembled as if the place itself were alive, thrumming with unseen connections to the tortured souls trapped within. I took another step back, but my feet felt heavy, as if the ground tried to claim me as its own. "Stay, become one with us." The specter cooed, its voice now a symphony of echoes that reverberated through the walls. "You'll never be alone." The sound of laughter erupted again, dissonant and shrill, rising from the depths of the shadows and filling every crevice of the diner. My heart sank. A terrifying reality started to dawn. The souls around Meth, very ones I had pitied, were not lost, but willing participants in this wicked game. "No!" I shouted, a fierce determination flooding my veins. I turned to flee, desperation fueling my every step until I collided with something solid. Another patron, their face twisted into a sickening grin. "You're too late. You've already chosen," they screamed, the others joining in, this chorus rising into a frenzied cacophony that clawed at my sanity. Panic surged as they swarmed me, their hands grasping, fingers slipping over skin and fabric, laughter morphing into shrieks of delight as they closed in. The diner was alive with the sound of collective madness, suffocating me in a grip of death. Then, amidst the chaos, I spotted the door, the one that had once promised escape. It loomed at the far side of the room, bathed in a sliver of eerie light. In that moment of desperation, I lunged for it, propelling myself through the thrumming group of twisted revelers, my heart pounding as their cries filled my ears. But as I reached for the door handle, it shrieked open violently, a gust of inky darkness pouring out to engulf me. It was no friend, but rather a malevolent force, swirling, rushing to claim its next victim. "Why do you resist?" the shadows whispered, their collective voice a thunderous roar that reverberated through me. "You're already ours." I couldn't think of an answer as the darkness closed in. Just as I thought I would be swallowed whole, I was propelled forward, through the threshold and into a world even darker than before. A void of nightmares stretched endlessly before me, and in the distance, I could see shapes forming, grotesque and shifting, carrying the weight of countless souls. That it was then I realized the diner hadn't been my prison at all. It was just a gateway, and what lay ahead was far more horrifying than the game itself. "Welcome." A voice that was both familiar and alien echoed in the air, as I felt the cold grip of the darkness tighten around me once more. "Your real trial begins now." The last shimmering light flickered and dissolved into the void, leaving me surrounded by the chilling laughter of the damned, my heart screaming as the shadows began to weave their torment anew, fashioning a fate I could never anticipate. And as the laughter swelled to a deafening crescendo, a terrifying thought emerged. The end was only the beginning. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to respond, to fight against the suffocating embrace of the darkness that engulfed me. But no sound escaped my lips. Instead, I felt the reality shift beneath my feet, the ground pulsating as if it were alive, contorting with unseen purpose. Shadows twisted and writhed around me, taking shape, morphing into flickering figures that bore the anguished faces of those who had disappeared within the diner's cursed walls. Where am I? I finally managed to ask, though the question hung heavy in the air, swallowed by the harsh cacophony of ghostly whispers that promised untold horrors. My eyes darted in every direction, searching for any sign of hope, but all I saw were grotesque apparitions lingering at the periphery of my vision. Wraith-like beings hovered and melted into the darkness, their mournful cries resonating deep within my chest. "You've crossed the threshold." The familiar voice chimed again, soothing yet laced with sinister delight. It echoed like a twisted lullaby, coaxing my panic into a controlled pulse within my veins. "You've stepped into a realm where despair is the currency. And your soul? Oh, sweet child, your soul is precious." With each word, the ground seemed to shimmer and ripple beneath me, drawing me deeper into an abyss where time no longer existed. I felt as if I were floating, suspended between nightmares, as a flood of memory as me own yet foreign washed over me. Faces of lost friends, their eyes haunted and pleading, swirled around me. I heard the screams of truckers caught in their own hells, their stories becoming threads that interwove with my own, painting a tapestry of dread. A sudden flash of light burst through the somber darkness, illuminating a stretch of an abandoned highway, cracked and littered with the remnants of tragedy. Silhouetted figures drifted on the edge of the pavement, their forms flickering like dying stars. As I tried to step closer, they faded into the shadows, leaving only a lingering sense of dread in their wake. "What happened to you?" I whispered, desperate for answers. But I was met with peals of laughter that echoed around me, vibrant and unsettling. The figures began to manifest more vividly, each adorned in the heavy burden of their final moments. A trucker, once robust and boisterous, lay crushed beneath an unseen weight. Another, his hollow eyes screaming in terror, pointed accusingly at something that lurked just beyond my line of sight. The darkness thickened, each breath becoming a struggle as a low rumble resonated from the pitch void beyond. I could feel it creeping closer, an unseen predator stalking its prey. The very air I inhaled was infused with the scent of decay and dread. "Join us," a voice hissed from the folds of the shadows, the laughter now a collective symphony of madness. "Become a part of their stories forever entwined." Suddenly, without warning, my feet began to give way. The ground beneath me cracked open like a yawning chasm, revealing a swirling abyss of despair. I felt the pull of the void tangle with my being, a seductive call to surrender to the shadows that yearned to claim me. Panic surged through my veins as I fought against the grip of the unseen force, my heart pounding furiously in my chest. In that moment of horrifying clarity, I recognized that the truckers' stories weren't just warnings. They were echoes of my own potential fate. With a desperate leap, I reached out, grasping for whatever stability remained, my fingers finding purchase on the jagged edge of the fracture, clinging to existence with every ounce of will I had left. "They want you to fall," a haunting voice coaxed, slipping through the veil of shadows around me. "But in the fall, there is freedom. Embrace the darkness. Find your true self." With one last surge of defiance, I began to pull myself up, my heart echoing hope against the cacophonous cries that erupted around me. Just as I thought I had escaped the clutches of despair, a hand, cold and clammy, wrapped around my ankle, pulling me back toward the abyss. "No, no," I screamed, clawing at the ground as I felt myself slipping. The shadows rejoiced, their laughter ringing out in horrific harmony. My surroundings twisted and collapsed into irrelevance, every glimpse of light swallowed by an eternity of darkness. In that moment, I understood the terrible truth. The diner hadn't just been a gateway. It was a purgatory, and I had been its latest acquisition. As I began to fall, The world around me dissolved into a whirlwind of faces, stories begging to be told, each one filled with a raw, insatiable hunger. "Will you be my next tale?" whispered a figure cloaked in the remnants of the past. Its hollow eyes bored into mine just before the darkness claimed me entirely. And as I plummeted into the depths below, the last remnants of my consciousness screamed in terror, knowing with chilling certainty that the true horror was just beginning. The darkness swallowed me whole, a heavy curtain of despair draping my existence in suffocating silence. I felt the weight of 1,000 lost souls crashing against me as I fell into a void that felt both infinite and claustrophobic. The sense of dread grew palpable, a tangible entity clawing at my consciousness. It was intoxicating and terrifying, as if the pain of those countless souls was coursing through my veins. Then, with a sudden and jarring snap, I came to a halt, deposited unceremoniously onto a cold, hard surface. The air around me was thick with a rancid odor, reminiscent of rotting flesh, and I gasped, greedily sucking in the musty air as though it were the last breath of life. Darkness shadowed the edges of my vision, and the acrid stench of sorrow hung heavily like an unseen weight. With trembling limbs, I pushed myself up, and the moment my eyes adjusted, they widened in horror. I was in what appeared to be a grotesque reflection of the Din-era macabre cavern, where tables were draped with the remnants of forgotten patrons. The floor was sticky with an unknown substance, glistening as if it were soaked in the essence of despair. Gnarled figures loomed in the shadows, their features obscured, but their eyes, those betrayed eyes, shone with a sickly light, flickering like dying candles. My instincts screamed for me to flee, but the melancholy call of the entities tethered me to the spot. Their whispers coiled around me like tendrils of smoke, each word soaked in anguish, echoing the lost stories of the damned. "Help us," they wailed, unspoken agony laced within every syllable. "We are trapped in eternal longing. You must understand. What do you want from me?" I croaked, my voice barely more than a ghostly hush as the words hung in the air, swallowed almost immediately by the wailing shadows. The figures began to coalesce, gaining form as the shadows receded, revealing their harrowing shapes. They stood in a circle around me, their features morphing and blending into each other, forming a grotesque masquerade of grief. One figure, a woman with sunken cheeks and lifeless eyes, stepped closer. Her voice poured forth like honey tainted with tragedy. "You and I are bound. Your fate is linked to ours. You must bear witness." As she spoke, the memories of her death began to play out around us, like a cursed film unraveling on a rotting projector. I felt the air grow heavy, and the diner around me swirled, morphing into a long-haul truck stop shrouded in night, where she had shared her last breaths with us. Suddenly, I was no longer just a spectator. I was thrust into her torment, a flash of how the truck had barreled through the darkness, her screams mingling with the screech of tires and the crunch of shattered glass. I screamed, my voice fractured by the echo of her demise pressing upon me. "I can't bear this." But as I tried to turn away, I was paralyzed by the force of the vision. My will wrested from me. Visions of other horrors erupted around the cavernous diner. The truckers, mere shadows of themselves, were engulfed in a maelstrom of despair. One man, his face raw with panic, struggled with a ghastly creature, a spectral behemoth that gnawed at his soul, while another, drenched in cold sweat, was perpetually trapped in a twisted game of chance, dice that would never roll in his favor. Each turn revealed glimpses of torment, shackled by memories that echoed off the cavern walls like thunder, each story wrapped in layers of vindication and remorse. Desperation surged through me, and I clawed at my own memories, searching for a way out of this living nightmare. But my thoughts became jumbled, tangled in threads of fate that kept pulling me back into the depths. Just as I thought I might succumb to their fate, a voice, clear and piercing, sliced through the fog. "Awaken. You've been called." In that split second, I felt another force enveloping me, colder than the darkest night. It was the sensation of countless hands grasping for my own, but instead of pulling me down, they felt as though they were trying to elevate me, urging me to rise against the tide of despair. But their grasp was not gentle. It tightened around my limbs like the iron grip of the damned. As I looked toward the accumulating shadows, they were growing restless, hovering closer, their haunting whispers twisting into a chilling crescendo. Do not resist. You belong to us. Panic coursed through me as my heart thumped violently in my chest. It was a warning, a harbinger of doom that sent chills ripping down my spine. Just as I felt their grasp begin to tighten irrevocably, a truck's blaring horn pierced the uncanny stillness, jolting me back into a semblance of reality. But it wasn't just the horn. It was the roar of a truck engine, rumbling ominously in the distance. An overwhelming surge of adrenaline propelled me into the thick darkness, instinct driving me to escape the entities of despair that hungered for my essence. As I fled deeper into the shadows, I felt the weight behind me shift. Something, or someone, was pursuing me through the silken void. I ran blindly, the shadows swirling around me, a living kaleidoscope of terror. The laughter morphed into a savage growl, echoing in the hollow depths of the diner cavern, reverberating with insatiable hunger. "Come back," echoed the voices, now a cacophony of despair and fury. And just as I was about to reach a glimmer of light ahead, something ice-cold clamped around my wrist, yanking me backward, plunging me further into the darkness. I twisted and thrashed, fighting against it, but my voice had vanished amidst the choking shadows. In that moment, all I could hear was my heartbeat drumming in my ears, drowning in the desperate cries of those trapped within this wretched purgatory. And as I was yanked further into the suffocating abyss, I caught a glimpse of the truths that awaited, each one darker than the last, each more haunting. And then, everything went silent. In the stillness, I could feel the weight of countless lost souls, beckoning, pleading. "Will you join us? Embrace the shadows that call for you?" A flash of something massive surged behind me, a dark presence looming with ill intent, and I knew whatever was waiting for me in the depths would rip apart the fragile threads of my sanity. And I was about to discover the true depth of this nightmare. The silence didn't last long. It erupted into a howling wind that seemed to surge from every angle, wrapping around me like frantic fingers clawing for purchase. The cool breath of the darkness sucked the heat from my marrow, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. I grasped at the air, searching for any semblance of reality, but every inch I moved forward only seemed to plunge me deeper into the unfathomable abyss. I turned, fighting against the frigid grip of the looming presence behind me. It was then that I caught sight of what had seized my wrist, a hand, skeletal and gnarled, emerging from the primordial darkness. The fingers were long and thin like branches stripped of bark, pale and glistening with a sheen that suggested they had been soaking in despair for centuries. "Oh!" I screamed, yanking my arm desperately. But the hand only tightened its grip, and with it came an icy wave of terror that washed over my senses, suffocating me. Instinct told me to fight, but the metal-cold touch sent shocks through my body, anchoring me in place. "Why do you resist?" a voice hissed, slithering through the shadows like a snake. "You cannot escape what you are a part of. Your essence belongs to this place." I strained to break free, every fiber of my being fighting the unnatural pull that threatened to drag me into the yawning maw of annihilation. But behind me, I felt the shadows stirring, their whispers merging into a singular, bone-chilling chant, "Stay with us forever." And then, as if sensing my struggle, the darkness shifted, revealing a sliver of light just up a heated doorway swathed in a faint glow, suggesting hope amidst the swirling despair. Without thinking, I lunged toward it, propelled by the primal instinct to survive. With a final, desperate surge, I broke free of the skeletal hand. It wailed a sound so horrendous that for a moment, the world around me froze, and I could feel an immense force tugging at my consciousness, trying to wrench me back. I stumbled forward, the light enveloping me, and as I stepped through the threshold, it was as though I had pierced the veil separating life from a haunting reality. I tumbled into what I believed was the safety of the diner once more, but I quickly found that it was an eerie replica, heavily drenched in an oppressive fog that twisted the ordinary into unsettling shapes. But this was no memory-free haven. The air crackled with latent horrors waiting to explode into chaos. The specters from before were now wreathed in swirling mists, their voices mingling into a dissonant harmony of lamentation that filled my ears. Shadows darted about, flitting in and out of sight, forming figures that twisted and writhed as if caught in a dance of perpetual agony. The scent of decay sharpened, strangling my throat, and I felt my stomach churn, teetering on the precipice of another wave of despair. It was then that I noticed a figure seated at the far end of the din, a man with hollow cheeks and hollowed eyes, chained to the booth, every inch of him drenched in desperation. He stared at me with a glimmer of recognition, deep sorrow etched on his face. "You shouldn't have come back," he rasped. "They'll feed on your fear until you become one with them. Your light calls to their darkness." As he spoke, I felt a flicker of dread answer his warning, a tiny flame of doubt igniting within me. "What do you mean?" I stammered, my voice trembling. "Who are they?" But before his response could take shape, the shadows coalesced around him, enveloping him in a thick veil. I watched in horror as his agonized expression twisted into a rictus of despair, his body convulsing. The shadows grew restless, feeding off the fear that radiated from me and the fallen man, pulsing with energy and madness. That I tried to retreat, to escape this new nightmare, but an unseen force whipped about me, immobilizing my limbs just as before. "Embrace your destiny," they howled. "You are meant to join us." Suddenly, the diner's fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed, casting erratic shadows across the walls, animating them into nightmarish forms, figures writhing and crying, begging for release without hope or peace. The cacophony escalated as patches of the floor began to morph, forming mouths that whispered plea after plea, clamoring for listeners, staring back at the figure trapped in the corner. I could see the light slowly ebbing from his eyes. With a sudden burst of strength, I lunged toward him, desperate to break the chains that bound him. But voices warned me at the edges of my mind. "Stay away. He is only bait." Realization hit like a battering ram, but it was too late. Shadows surged forward, merging into one horrid entity that surged toward me, reveling in my fear. I screamed, my voice lost among the clamoring desperation that echoed around you as I felt the entity reach for me. My vision blurred, and within it, illuminated against the darkness, I caught sight of countless faces twisting in torment, their eyes pleading with me. And just before everything was engulfed in the swirling maelstrom, I felt the shadows close in around me, a chilling whisper weaving through the darkness. "Join us, keep the cycle alive, the nightmare will never end." The words clawed at my sanity as I felt myself surrendering, drifting closer to the dark heart of this purgatory. As the last thread of light faded, I realized with gut-wrenching clarity I was not the first to utter a cry for help, nor would I be the last. And as this revelation washed over me, the shadows began to laugh, a sound so haunting and spine-chilling that it echoed into oblivion. I braced myself, knowing that the true horror of the truckers' untold stories awaited me beyond comprehension, and somehow, I was destined to unleash their nightmares. Then, suddenly, just as the shadows prepared to swallow me whole, the diner door swung open, casting a blinding light that shattered the darkness, and a figure stepped inside. What emerged, however, was more horrifying than I had ever imagined. The figure stood silhouetted against the bright light pouring in from the doorway. It was impossibly tall, clad in tattered leather and denim that swayed like flags in a tempest, giving the impression of a lingering storm. The air crackled with an electric tension as it stepped further into the diner, and the shadows recoiled, as if recognizing a force they feared. My heart raced. The man's face was obscured by a hood, shadows clinging to him, curling around his fierce gaze that burned like twin coals in the depths of night. "You shouldn't linger here," he called, his voice thunderous yet oddly melodic, sending tremors through the ground. The shadows writhed in agitation, their laughter devolving into a howling wind that rushed toward him, but he remained unfazed. "You won't claim her," he thundered, his voice slicing through the despair like a blade. The figure pointed at the shadowy entity, and suddenly the diner erupted in a cacophony of screams as the tendrils of darkness hurled themselves toward him. In response, he lifted a hand, emitting a beam of light that illuminated the very fabric of existence within this haunting realm. The light pushed against the shadows, dispersing them momentarily, revealing a glimpse of the faces caught within their mouths opening in soundless wails, eyes wide and pleading. "Run," he ordered, urgency threading through his tone. Yet, I stood frozen, half entranced by the brilliant aura around him and half terrified by the reality of my situation. The trapped man in the corner, The whispers echoing in my mind, they all urged me to flee. But something deep within me urged caution. He emanated a raw power that both attracted and repelled. With a sudden lurch, the haunting figure shifted, as if sensing my indecision. "You must decide," he implored, the light surrounding him flickering with intensity. "Choose to fight or succumb to the shadows." As the shadows gathered for a new assault, I felt my heart hammering, a vile blend of instinct and fear clawing at my throat. The captive man's eyes flickered with a mix of hope and despair. "Don't trust him," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper yet laden with urgency. "He offers only an illusion of freedom." But the taller figure bore down on me, his voice growing more insistent, drowning out the cries of anguish. "Let me show you the truth. This realm feeds on your doubt." The diner quaked, and in that moment, the ground beneath us heaved violently, splintering as if the very structure of reality were coming undone. The lights above flickered more furiously now, casting grotesque shadows that seemed alive, disdainful of who I might become. "Make a choice," the figure shouted as remnants of light whirled around him, resisting the darkness like a barrier. "You can escape this fate." I gazed back at the swirls of shadows, their tendrils creeping closer, hungry for my fear, my hesitation. The rest of the diner had dissolved into chaos. Chairs toppled, tables strewn about, and the clamor of tortured souls in the throes of despair reverberated within me. Then, from somewhere inside, a voice broke through the tumult, of voice that was not lost to the shadows. It echoed in my mind, urging me to focus, to choose. Embrace your fear. Embrace your truth. In that whirlwind of chaos, I felt an inkling of clarity and resolution. Suddenly, I turned to the captive man. What do I do? Confront them. His eyes blazed with an intensity that pierced through the darkness. You can wield your light against the shadows. Before I could process his words, the shadows surged forward, the air thickening with their anguish. Time felt infinite as I gathered my resolve, illuminated by the fierce spirit within me that had dragged me through horrors unseen. I reached deep inside, feeling the warmth of life flare beneath the oppressive cold. The tall figure saw this flicker of determination, and his gaze shifted from urgency to something like hope. Now, with a burst of newfound energy, I plunged my hand into the swirling light that surrounded the figure. The shadows recoiled, their whispers turning into violent screams, swirling back in disarray. It felt as if I had unleashed a torrent of righteous energy against their consuming grip. But just as the shadows began to fracture, a piercing shriek echoed from within the darkness, turning my blood to ice. "I will not be denied," a voice thundered, echoing with the depth of ages lost. Around us, the diner warped and twisted, the mirror of my own choices warping, taking form, revealing grotesque incarnations of my deepest fears and failures. I was losing my grasp on reality as the shadows rushed back fiercely, swirling around the liberating light, and the world began to dim. The figure beside me faltered, his confidence crashing into uncertainty. "No, stay strong," he bellowed, but the darkness swarmed, its hypnotic pull growing, threatening to eclipse everything. Then, as the last beams of light began to fade, a chill pierced my heart, and I heard Ida whisper, mounting into a dreadful crescendo as dozens of faces pressed against the wall of shadows, their mouths gaping in fused agony, reaching out to me. "You are one of us. You cannot leave." With a surge of defiance, I screamed back, "I am not like you." But a deep, numbing fear grabbed hold of my throat as I felt the shadows constricting around me once more, and just as all hope felt extinguished, the diner door slammed shut, an echoing thud like the toll of a death knell. Suddenly, the shadows froze, suspended in time, the faces shouting in terror flaring like embers around me, and a new presence materialized, a figure even darker than the rest, a grotesque amalgamation of all they had devoured, each hopeless soul woven into its being. It struck the ground like thunder, casting an aura of pure malevolence that coalesced around me. "Welcome," it hissed, an ocean of despair glinting in its hollow eyes, "to where your nightmares truly begin." And with that, the world spiraled anew into darkness, and I was left grasping for what little light remained, knowing full well that in just the flick of an eye, the true horror was only just beginning. The darkness was alive, pulsating and writhing with a malevolent hunger that gripped every fiber of my being. I stood alone, trapped in this immortal fragment of hell where shadows danced with sorrow and despair wove its intricate threads through the air. I could still hear the echoes of the diner, the very place that had lulled me into this nightmare. A cursed sanctuary masquerading as a beacon of refuge. But no more. Welcome. The grotesque amalgamation hissed again, its voice a symphony of the damned, reverberating with agony and time-worn malice. You have been chosen to join us. You long for stories. Now you will live them. I felt the weight of countless eyes upon me, each one a haunting reminder of those who had suffered before, the truckers and lost souls forever entwined in the fabric of this tortured dimension. Please, don't, I gasped, stumbling backward as fear surged anew, threatening to drown me in its visceral grip. The figure advanced, tendrils of darkness unfurling with sinister grace, ready to consume. It was then I realized, with heart-stopping clarity, that the diner I once ran from was but an illusion, a fleeting glimpse of a life distorted by layers of dread that had coalesced into flesh, bone, and memory. The shadows pressed closer, and I could hear their collective whispers rising, an intoxicating temptation to surrender. Join us, share your story, they murmured, the seductive promise of oblivion curling around me like FOG. I screamed, my voice a single spark against a vast empty void. I'm not like you. And at this proclamation, a flicker of light ignited within me, flickering like a lone candle drowning in darkness. But then, a shadow lunged toward me, its icy tendrils wrapping around my throat, choking the breath from my lungs. It's too late. The darkness cackled, laughter that twisted into the very essence of terror. You've already chosen. But something within me surged, a primal instinct fueled by the memories of those I had encountered. I thought of the truckers, their faces etched in torment, their stories swirling through the layers of despair. In that moment of clarity amidst the oncoming abyss, I embraced that flickering light deep within my core, forging it into something tangible. I will not become one of you, I bellowed, the scream erupting from my throat like a war cry against despair. With every ounce of will I possessed, I reached out into the shadows, feeling the tangible weight of their embrace. I felt each flicker of memory tied to this realm, the laughter of the other truckers, their pleas for help, and I gathered them, pouring them into my declaration. I am not just a story. I am a survivor. The monstrosity paused, the shadows thundering in agitation, writhing and snaking back as if struck. No, you cannot defy us. It seemed to gather itself, siphoning the darkness from the atmosphere. But I pressed on, my heart thumping with rage, with hope. I intertwined their memories with my own, loosening their bonds from the shadow's hungry grasp. Images swirled around meth girls' vacant eyes pleading for aid, the driver's wild stories unfurling once more in roaring voices, a collective memory coming to life as a crash of stories collided into one another. I felt each life dragging against the fetters of the void, desperate for release, and as I brought those memories to the forefront, your remnants swiftly surged past, breaking away from the chains of despair. The shadows recoiled, their shrill wails of protest forming a haunting chorus of wrath surrounding me. But with still deeper determination, I thrust my hand forward, the light I had forged illuminating my path like a star breaking through a storm. The eruption of light cascaded outward, bursting through the heavy shroud of darkness, fracturing its form like glass crushing beneath a hammer. And then it happened. I stepped back, and in the fleeting moment of clarity, a crack formed below the creature as shadows spiraled into chaos, unraveling their form. No, the figure wailed, its voice tearing through the air as the light enveloped it, blinding in its purity. The very fabric of reality around us began to tremble and shatter, the diner and its cursed memories collapsing into a vortex of swirling tendrils. You will regret this, it shrieked, but I held on firm, gathering strength from every lost soul, every story yearning for the light of day. As I ascended through the gold and silver fractures, I caught glimpses of faces, remnants of those consumed by despair. Thank you. Their voices echoed, harmonizing into a chorus that melded with the crackling warmth of light surrounding me. I could see the truth of their stories coming back together, weaving that rich tapestry of life once again, making whole what had been ripped apart. Then, with a blinding flash, I felt myself propelled through the veil, emerging not into the diner but onto an empty stretch of highway, illuminated by the dim glow of a distant moon, unmarred by the horrors of the past. I gasped as fresh air filled my lungs. I was free, but as relief washed over me, a chill enveloped my heart. I turned back, expecting to see a fading nightmare, but the shadows lingered at the edge of the horizon, pulsing with a dark promise, seeking something far more sinister now. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The darkness was still there, shifting, waiting, hungry for the next wayward soul lost on the roads of despair. As I looked up at that vast night sky, filled with shimmering stars dulled by the encroaching shadow, a suffocating fear gripped me. The stories of the lost truckers would never end. They were stowed safely within the shadows, destined to leap into the darkness at the next innocent traveler. With chilling clarity, I understood. I had escaped one nightmare, only to become its harbinger, bound to the darkness that lingered just beyond the reach of hope. The true horror would never fade. It only awaited the next to join the ranks of the damned. As I turned to retreat into the night, a whisper touched my ear, soft yet foreboding. Your story will begin anew, and with that haunting echo guiding me, I knew the cycle would perpetuate, looping on endlessly through the corridors of the night, resonating with the truth. Sometimes the shadows do not take you, they wait, feeding on your fear until you cannot help but return.